Pornography is easier for kids to access today than ever before. Studies show the average age of first exposure, listen up parents, is as young as 9 or 10. It's no wonder so many parents feel overwhelmed or unsure how to handle it, especially with so much hypersexualized content just a click away. Joining us today is Parker Hymas, Director of Public Outreach at Fight the New Drug, a nonprofit working to educate people about the harmful effects of pornography.
This is Parenting Great Kids with Dr. Meg Meeker.
Parker, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Tough topic. And it's one of those topics that parents just sort of want to turn their face away. Because I, every once in a while, talk to parents about, pornography being at their kids' fingertips, particularly if they're walking around with a cell phone in their hands and they think, oh, no, my son or my daughter would never do that. They're a good kid. Let's talk about the digital minefield. Now, we know that kids are getting exposed to porn younger and younger. And I often tell parents of those good kids, which all parents say, and they are good kids, kids don't have to go looking for it. Sometimes it just jumps in them. So what are the most common ways kids are seeing pornography?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple great things you've already mentioned, right? One of which is that just because your child's been exposed to or consumed pornography doesn't make them a bad kid, right? Like, it's an unhealthy decision. We want kids to make healthier decisions, to participate in healthier behaviors, but it doesn't make them a bad kid. And by and large, the vast majority of kids today will at some point be exposed to pornography, like you said. Now, how are kids often exposed? Friends, social media, the internet, all of those things, right? Those are probably the three key ways that kids are exposed. Someone shows them pornography, something pops up, or they seek it out on their own, or social media. Social media is one of the biggest places that people end up seeking out pornography. And it's not necessarily that they're seeing the same, they're seeing content, I guess I should say, that often will lead them down a rabbit hole to seek out pornography online.
What are the things that I tell parents, because they get mad if their young boys, for instance, go back and they think he's going to become a sex addict or a porn addict. And I say, it's a natural response for a 9 or 10-year-old boy to see something and go, oh, what is it? And want to go back and find out more about it. So, it's not an influence in a child that says he's a bad child. It's just sort of a normal curiosity, interest. Talk about the science behind the screens. Now, you're a research guy. What does science tell us about pornography and how it affects the developing brains in kids?
Yeah, great questions. So Fight the New Drug, we're a research aggregate, so we take research coming out of major respected academic institutions. We try to make that understandable, digestible, and accessible for everyday people, especially young people. And what we know is that the research shows that porn tends to be habit forming, it becomes an escalating behavior, and it impacts the individual consumer's mental health, which is especially problematic when we're talking about kids, right? Kids already... Many young people today are struggling with their mental health. Pornography is only going to worsen those issues. And then, of course, when children's brains are still developing, having something that's habit forming or can be an escalating behavior can be even more problematic for young people than it is for an adult because of the fact that their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed yet.
Mm-hmm. I've seen studies on the impact of social media and video games on the rewiring of kids' brains, the sort of neural mapping. And they show that there are changes with repeated exposure to, violence. Does the same kind of thing happen with pornography, where if you look at it over and over and over, you actually get brain changes of the neural pathways in there?
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're referring to when we're talking about how something can be habit forming, right? So over time, people that consume pornography, it weakens the ability for the prefrontal cortex to put the brakes on the desire to consume more porn. And so because of that, the reward system begins to kind of run unchecked. So people need more porn more frequently, more extreme forms of content. And that's where we start to see issues in their real life, right? That impacts their everyday life. If people need more porn more frequently, more extreme forms of content, not only are they seeking out and engaging in more risky behaviors, but like they're spending their time focusing on when is the next time that I can consume pornography, and that in turn impacts mental health, right? We know individuals that consume porn have poor mental health, lower self-esteem, poor body image, less fulfilling relationships, and ultimately they report more loneliness than those who don't consume pornography. And that's especially problematic because many people think that consuming porn will help them feel better, but in the long run it actually only further complicates issues surrounding the consumer's mental health.
Now, I know that pornography isn't just prevalent in kids' lives and exposure, but I know that it's a huge problem for adult men. And, if you have a father who is looking at a lot of porn, his kids don't know it, and his 12, 13, 14-year-old son comes along and starts looking at porn, is he more likely to say, oh, it's no big deal, keep going at it? I mean, what do you do, in other words, if the parent or one of the parents says it's really not a big deal? Are they more likely or less likely to help their kids stay away from it? You may not know. I'm just sort of poking at you here.
No, that's a great question. I don't know of any research specific to that, like, kind of niche area, but that is a problem. We seek to educate all people because many people have never even considered that porn might be harmful, but especially young people growing up today, many of them have never even considered that porn might be harmful. It's not even something that has occurred to them, right? In the same way that many people turn on a light switch, they don't know how electricity is produced, how it gets to your home, how it even works. Like, it literally sounds like magic. If you were like 150 years ago and you told someone that you could move this thing up or down and it would produce or not produce light, they would be like, that's an insane thing to say, right? And I think that's many young people's experience with pornography. No one talks to them about it. They were exposed at far too young of an age, like you've mentioned, and they know it makes them feel good. That's the extent of their understanding of pornography because people are uncomfortable talking with them about it, and that's not helping, right? We need to have open and honest conversations regardless of if it makes us comfortable or uncomfortable in order to help especially young people to make healthier decisions.
Now, so 9 or 10 years old in a boy is prepubertal. And does it affect a prepubertal male the same as it would a postpubertal male?
Yeah, I don't know any specific research in that particular area because obviously like studying children and pornography is something that can be a little bit tricky. But what we do know is that a recent report from Common Sense Media is that the majority of young people today are exposed to porn by the time that they're between 11 and 13 years old. Some of them are exposed far younger, as early as 7 years old, like you've mentioned. And we know that 75% of 13 to 17-year-old males and 70% of 13 to 17-year-old females have viewed, consumed, or been exposed to pornography. So this is not a boy-girl issue. This isn't there's no diversifying factor that would make someone immune from the ability to struggle with pornography or have it impact them negatively. Anyone can struggle with pornography, and we want that to be so clear for parents because a recent report by the BBFC found that 3 out of 4 parents, 75% of parents, think that their children have not seen pornography. And when they looked at the data respondents of just those parents' children, they found that the majority of the parents who believe their kids haven't seen porn, the majority of those parents' kids had already been exposed to pornography. And that's where the gap is, right? Not only the gap in understanding of technology, understanding of accessibility, understanding what the issue with pornography is today, the type of content that's really available versus a magazine from 50, 60 years ago. The content today is extremely more violent, abusive, degrading, distorted. And that goes right along with the research we know. When people consume porn, they need more extreme forms of content. So, of course, the kind of content that's being produced 30 years into the ubiquity of the internet is going to be more extreme, more violent, more degrading, more abusive, more shocking in order to get people to consume more content.
Well, and the more shocking it is, the more kids are prone to look at it again. not because they're bad kids, as I said, but they're curious. They think, it's kind of
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
driving down the highway and you see a car accident. It's hard not to stare because it's a
Yeah,
shock to your system.
everybody at least peeks at the car accident, right? And that's the thing.
They do, and they
as the
slow
content
down.
becomes more extreme, not only do people seek out more extreme content when they're struggling, whether they're a youth or an adult, but the fact that this is where the baseline is now for pornography, and that's what most kids are exposed to, is so extreme already. That is, not only are they naturally curious about sex, obviously, but they're also being exposed to content that is so shocking and so drives so much curiosity in them, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Talk about how looking at even a little bit of porn for kids impacts the relationships that they have and the emotions or emotional issues that they could have surrounding, friends or parents, siblings. So just to dig a little bit deeper, how does pornography affect kids emotionally, and how does it impact their relationships?
Yeah, it's a great question. So obviously, not everyone that's exposed to porn becomes addicted, but many people find themselves developing unhealthy habit, having a compulsive behavior, and there is research to show that porn addiction is very real. It shares many similarities to addictions to a substance like, say, nicotine that makes cigarettes and tobacco products addictive. But aside from all of that, to kind of answer your question, the problem is when kids are exposed to pornography, all people, when anyone's exposed to pornography, but especially young people, it really does affect relationships. We know from the research that porn impacts what we love, how much we love, and how we think about the people we love. That's how we often put it. And that's because research shows that pornography, many researchers believe it to be a supernormal stimulus, meaning that the content that kids are exposed to or that adults are exposed to, it in the brain, it becomes so intriguing that people often end up seeking out pornography instead of real life partners and relationships. Additionally, we know that individuals that seek out pornography, we know that they're more likely to have lower satisfaction in their relationship, a greater likelihood of cheating, all of these issues in relationships. And, a lot of the research on how pornography impacts relationships does directly point to how porn impacts romantic relationships. But there's more research being done all the time to show that it impacts all types of meaningful connections. And we know that people withdraw when they consume pornography. They often withdraw. They spend more time alone. They can struggle with mental health issues like we talked about. And that impacts young people's relationship with their friends or their parents or their siblings, right? Because they're withdrawing, they're consuming pornography, they're spending time alone, not spending time with real people in real life.
Mm-hmm. So it's really going to impact all of your relationships. Crazy, dumb question, but I'm thinking of all the parents out there thinking, is there anything of benefit to pornography?
No, this is a good question because we should be talking about this issue broadly, right? And one of the things I try to help people understand is that pornography, like Fight the New Drug, our focus is on the harms of pornography. We don't think that there's any long-term benefits to the harms of porn. There hasn't been a single longitudinal study that shows over time that porn has a positive impact on relationships, for example. We know that it has all of these negative effects, but there are many people out in the world who, regardless of if they understand the research or not, are going to choose to continue to consume pornography. We acknowledge that. Not everyone is going to agree with us. Even if people understand the research on porn's harms, it doesn't mean that they're going to stop consuming it. Not everyone will, right? People will always have different opinions on the same subject. That's human nature. And what we want people to understand is that at least the one thing that at least everyone should be able to agree on is that at some age, young people at least shouldn't be being exposed to pornography. So we understand that adults are going to make their own choices and they can choose whether or not to consume pornography. We still want to educate them and encourage them not to consume porn, but at least the common ground we can find with people who disagree with us is that children shouldn't be consuming pornography, right? There's no reason that an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old should be consuming pornography. It's not healthy for them. It's not appropriate. And that's the common ground we can find with people.
Well, the only reason I asked that question, which I did not want to ask, but I did it because
No, you're okay.
And I'm so grateful you said there's no benefit. I'm like,
Yeah.
what am I going to do if he says there is with kids? And I'm like, but anyway, but here's why I ask it, because I think there are a lot of younger adults out there, millennials, who will say, oh, what's the big deal? It adds an extra dimension to our marriage. They genuinely don't understand how bad it is for them emotionally, physically, if they're acting out, how bad it is for their relationships. And I think they come up with all of these excuses for why it's okay to look at porn. And we know, and research shows, I'm sure you've seen it, that pornography is horrible for men and for women. It harms their relationships with everybody across the board. Just like you said, let's talk about fighting the new drug. And this is what you do. Talk to us about the program, what you do, how do you empower parents and kids to stay away from pornography?
Okay, that's I really like that you're kind of asking about the organization, because sometimes we talk about the issue a lot, and I do want to kind of mention what it is,
Yes.
What exactly is this nonprofit that I work for, right? Yeah, so Fight the New Drug, we were founded in 2009. We've spoken to over 1 million people in live audiences. We have over 6 million followers across social media platforms, and we exist to allow individuals the opportunity, like I said, to make an informed decision on the topic of porn. So we share the research that demonstrates, and the personal stories that demonstrate the impacts porn has on real people, and we encourage people not to consume pornography. Now, we want to educate everyone, people of all ages, but at the same time, we really want to especially give the youngest generation an opportunity to make an informed decision on the topic of porn. Mm-hmm. So we educate in a variety of ways. We have many resources on our website, which are all free because we're a nonprofit, so ftnd.org. Fight the New Drug, ftnd.org. You can find all of our resources there, as well as the research that we cite. We have social media is a big way that we seek to educate people. Like I said, we have millions of followers across platforms. We get information out. We run campaigns. We have influencers who post, all of those kinds of things. And then one of the biggest ways that we educate is we have a podcast called Consider Before Consuming, where we interview people who have struggled with pornography, survivors of the commercial sexual exploitation industry, generally, experts. We have a documentary called Brain Heart World that's appropriate for kids 11 years and older. And then one of our biggest boots on the ground programs that we use to educate on the impacts of porn is our live presentations. So we travel all over and we do live events pretty much anywhere that people are willing to have us. And we do those live events for middle schools, junior highs, high schools, college campuses, community nights, parent nights, church groups, advocacy groups, nonprofits, and we'll speak and have huge audiences where we talk about the impacts of porn, we talk about the research, and we talk about the resources, like what can we do about this issue. So, if there's someone listening to this right now that you're thinking, oh, this is great, I want to get involved, one of the best things that you can do is figure out, okay, how can I get a live event in my area? Because post-COVID, one of the best ways to educate people on a topic is to have a live event, to talk to people face to face in a live event setting and help get them resources, talk about the issue, raise awareness, educate people. And live events are one of the best ways that we can do that. So if someone's listening, they want to get involved, they like what we're talking about, call an old high school principal, see if they'd have us come to the school, talk to your kids' school leadership or school counselor or principal or whoever it might be, right? Talk to a pastor, talk to a community group, and figure out how we can come to your community and talk about this issue in person with your community to raise awareness, to give parents resources, and kind of cover all of the things that we want to be able to do in an event like that.
And I would encourage parents out there, even if their kids are not looking at porn, and even if they think, it's really not an issue, so I don't have to struggle with this. Get your group in their school now as a preventative thing, because education
Absolutely.
and awareness in parents is so important. And I think it's easier, you're more open to consuming information that's hard to consume if you haven't been traumatized in your family by it. And so I think it's a really, really important preventative measure. Now, the other thing too, I just wanted to say, so many times we talk about problems and, sexual activity in little kids and drugs and so forth. And it's so discouraging for parents because we think, well, we don't really have an answer to it. But we have an answer here. And I really want to drive that home to parents because most kids, what's the percentage of kids that you say have seen pornography by the time they're 17? It's quite high, isn't it?
Yeah. So in the 13 to 17-year-old age range, that Common Sense Media reported that 75% of males and 70% of females had already been exposed to pornography. Now, if you were to lean that out, just looking at, the 17 and 18-year-olds, for sure it would be higher. Generally in the U.S., I believe, if I remember right, it's about a little over 91% of adult males and I want to say high 60% adult females report having consumed pornography just in the last 30 days. So 91%, a little over 91% of adult males in the U.S. and a little over 60% of adult females in the U.S. report just in the last 30 days having consumed pornography.
So it's pretty truthful to tell every parent out there, your kid's going to see pornography. They're going to have to deal with it, which means you're going to have to deal with it if you're a good parent, because kids on their own don't know what to do. If you have a 13, 14, 15-year-old who's seeing pornography and it's shocking to them, it can be traumatizing. I think it is traumatizing to a lot of kids. And the kids don't know what to do, but the parents need to know what to do, need to know how to talk to their kids, because pornography is going to come into your kids' lives via their screens. And so we really can't, turn our eyes away. And it's so easy because it's such a hard thing to think about. I think a lot of parents feel guilty if they haven't talked about it, if they have talked about it, if they're involved in it, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the default is to do nothing. But that doesn't help our kids, because not only are our kids intrigued by it, but I will say they can be traumatized by it. And if they're exposed to it at any age, I'll be honest, and I'm an old person, if I saw some of the stuff they're seeing, I would be traumatized. I'd have to have somebody untangle the mess in my head, because it's we're not talking about looking at a Playboy, centerfold. We're talking about active, bizarre acts in pornography.
Extreme violent content.
Extreme violence and what it does to girls, what it does to boys, what it does to the brother of a sister, how he perceives his sister has changed, how he perceives his mother, how a mother sees her son. I mean, it really, really, really messes with kids and adults' heads. So there is recovery and there is hope. I want to take the last couple minutes to give you time to say, to recap our conversation, and I really need you to tell parents again where they can find you and where they should start, whether they think their kid has seen pornography or not.
Yeah, this is going to be my super fast answer to kind of all of those things. Parents want a quick solution, right? We want to be able to solve this problem, to nip it in the bud. And that's a great attitude to have. Let's definitely nip this in the bud. But we need to understand that this is a complex issue at the same time, and that it requires a lot of work. If you had been out of a job for 3 months and you hadn't paid the mortgage for 2 months, and you had a job interview for a job that would allow you to provide for your family, as a parent, you would do just about anything to be prepared for that interview, right? We'd have a binder with all of our past work at past employers. We'd have a wonderful resume. We'd know everything about the company. We'd be practiced answering questions. We'd have questions ourselves to ask. But unfortunately, parents aren't always that prepared when it comes to having complex conversations with their kids. And the solution to this issue really is conversations. There are wonderful tools and resources on our website and affiliate partners and all of these great things. There's great technology, but at the end of the day, the solution really comes down to having open and honest conversations with our children. Now, you mentioned parents are a little bit hesitant about that, right? Sometimes they feel like they're robbing them of their innocence. Sometimes they feel like it's this, that, or it's too late, or it's too early. Well, there's never going to be a right time. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and I promise you that there is an age-appropriate way to have this conversation right now, today, with a child of any age. This isn't hey, when's the right time to have this conversation? I don't know, but let's ask a different question. How can I appropriately have this conversation today, regardless of the child's age? So if this is a 3-year-old, I have a 4-year-old. How am I going to talk to him about porn? Well, I'm not going to tell him that pornography exists and describe it to him, right? I'm going to say, hey, if you're looking over someone's shoulder and they're on their phone and you see something you don't know what it is, come talk to mom and dad. You're not in trouble, but we need to talk about it. If you are on a device somewhere and something pops up, if there's a commercial and something pops up or whatever it might be, right? Then just come talk to mom and dad. Like, we're just setting an expectation that we're open and honest with each other, that we're going to have conversations, and then that conversation evolves. That is definitely not how I'm talking about it if I had a 17-year-old, right? Or a 11-year-old, right? And we know the rates of exposure, we know the ages, so that gives you a really good idea of when to start really advancing this conversation. But how can we talk about it now, today? Now, as far as resources, we have many resources for you. Go to ftnd.org/parents. You can find all of the best resources for parents right there, easily accessible. So ftnd.org/parents. And then, of course, you can check us out anywhere on social media, Fight the New Drug, on all of the platforms. So.
My guest has been Parker Hymas. He's the Director of Public Outreach at Fight the New Drug. It's a nonprofit working to educate people of all ages about the problem of pornography. Parents, if you have a 3-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 18-year-old, please, please, please go to ftnd.org/parents and learn what you can do to help your kids, because this is a real problem. It doesn't look like it's going to go away very soon, and it can have a huge impact on kids emotionally and mentally. And our job is to help you, parents, raise your kids the best way that you can. Parker, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This is great.
Kids are being exposed to porn as early as age 9, and most parents don't know until it's too late. That's why Dr. Meg Meeker is breaking it all down in a free live event. How to talk to your kids about porn. Join us on Thursday, September 25th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Parenting is hard, but you don't have to do it alone. Save your seat now. Space is limited.